An apple pie.
Before launching his career as the mind behind the dark yet whimsical world of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and then further solidifying himself as the master of strange and unusual with Beetlejuice, a young, unknown Tim Burton got hand-selected fresh out of the California Institute of the Arts, or CalArts, in 1980 to work for Disney, where he would spend the first half of the decade gaining professional experience within the animation department and working as an uncredited storyboard and concept artist on films such as Fox and the Hound, Tron, and The Black Cauldron. What a dream come true, right? However, in later years, Tim would describe this era as a deeply unsatisfying period.
I was not good at drawing Disney characters. The first film I worked on was called Fox and the Hound. And all of my foxes looked like they'd been hit by cars. So we took out the roadkill sequence, and none of my work really survived that film.
Because of this, he spent a lot of time drifting off daydreaming. Higher-ups were constantly searching new roles and positions for him to fill. They recognized his potential, but weren't sure how to utilize his skills and unique creative vision effectively on other features. So executives took a chance and gave him the funds to direct a handful of his own smaller projects. The first was a 5-minute stop-motion gothic short called Vincent, based on a poem by Burton. It tells the story of a boy detached from the world around him who ends up immersed in twisted, surreal daydreams of the macabre and loses his grip on reality. He sees himself as a tortured artist conducting experiments and envisioning himself becoming his favorite actor, and coincidentally Tim's favorite actor, Vincent Price, who they actually got to narrate the poem.
He likes to experiment on his dog, Abercrombie, in the hopes of creating a horrible zombie.
It was a relatable story for Burton, a creative project he could finally identify with. In the end, Disney agreed that the short was very impressive and well constructed, but they had no clue how to market it to their audience or integrate it into their existing brand. Despite its critical accolades and even winning some awards, the lack of broad mainstream accessibility led Vincent to be placed into the vault, only ever shown at limited film festivals, until appearing as a bonus on some DVD copies of The Nightmare Before Christmas decades later. No matter, the year following would be a pivotal year in studio history, as April 1983 saw the launch of the iconic Disney Channel, a cable network in development since the late 70s, designed with the intent of providing extra family-friendly content to the living rooms of homes all across America, and ultimately, the world. Today, we recognize the Disney Channel for its variety of original sitcoms and animated series we grew up with, as well as for establishing the careers of many pop stars. However, in '83, the channel looked much different, mainly airing blocks of classic Mickey Mouse shorts, game shows, and educational, skill-building kids programming. One series, titled Disney Studios Showcase, gave viewers a sneak peek behind-the-scenes look at the animation and special effects process for their feature films. Additionally, these hour-long specials would debut exclusive content produced by the many artists and animators at the studio. On Halloween night, the network appropriately broadcasted an episode centered on Tim Burton, premiering his latest short film, a live-action, visually striking take on the classic Grimm's fairy tale, Hansel and Gretel, that involved quirky, whimsical characters like a wicked stepmother, a menacing puppet gingerbread man, a witch simultaneously threatening but mostly comedically off-kilter with a unique candy design. From the exaggerated, warped sets to the overall atmosphere, it was highly bizarre and clearly sparked out of the expressionist and gothic art that fueled Tim's developing style. Besides that, he also draws from Japanese culture with influences of colorful, complex toys, martial arts fight scenes, and filmmaking techniques popularized by creature features, namely Godzilla. Shot on 16mm film with a tight cast of amateur East Asian American actors, it was unlike any adaptation of Hansel and Gretel we've seen, feeling closer at times to a prototype pre-internet "don't hug me, I'm scared."
And that's what fairy tales, I always felt, did for me, is that they're quite frightening, abstract stories, and children relate to them because It represents the abstract of life and how how am I going to deal with something I don't really understand, and.
Despite core elements of the plot remaining faithful to the book, this version does offer some twists and minor changes to the story. The tale follows two kids named Hansel and Gretel living in poverty with their father, who in this telling is a struggling toy maker compared to a woodcutter, along with his newlywed wife. Similar to other famous stepmothers in fairy tales, is cruel, manipulative, and controlling. The darker thematic elements aren't as elaborated on, yet still inferred, as to alleviate themselves from this financial burden, she selfishly plans to abandon the children deep in the woods, believing that it would be more humane for Hansel and Gretel to be left eaten by wild animals than to watch them slowly starve to death. One day, the stepmother takes the two kids on a walk deep into the dark labyrinthian woods before causing a distraction, allowing her to sneak off. Unbeknownst to her, the kids were suspicious of the stepmother's true intentions from the start, leading Hansel to swiftly gather and drop a trail of pebbles, helping them find their way back. Irritated upon hearing this, the next day while their dad is out selling toys, Hansel and Gretel's stepmother takes them on another walk in the eerie woods. First, gifting them a toy duck, which she claims is a new top-secret invention created by the kid's father, suggesting that he wanted them to test it out and see if it works, encouraging the children to take the duck with them.
But if you don't want to take it, we'll just leave the duck at home. It doesn't matter to me if you insult your father.
No, I'll take the duck.
Along the way, Hansel once again leaves a trail of stones, but this time, they notice that the toy duck has covertly been eating all of the pebbles left behind, rendering the two completely alone and utterly lost. While wandering throughout the forest, the duck transforms into a robot that guides the pair to an enchanted gingerbread house. That looks like a drawing out of a children's sketchbook. Hansel and Gretel begin feasting on the gooey, candy-frosted exterior until we are greeted to one of the most distinct, nightmare fuel-inducing depictions of the evil witch. In a dual role played by the same actor as the stepmother. Now, unlike in Peter Pan, utilizing the actor in the role of the darling's father to also play Captain Hook, kind of a symbolic thing, in Hansel and Gretel, this isn't a common approach. Sure, it might be the result of budgetary limitations. It could be an intentional, subtle link between the two, adding a disturbing psychological layer to the character, insinuating the stepmother was only a disguise, a facade. Either way, she lures them into the house and treats them to, well, more sweets. Hours of indulging pass, and the witch shows the kids to a set of marshmallow beds for a good night's rest. For the two must be exhausted from all their travels. Once fast asleep, the beds spring to life, now possessing multiple arms with sharp striped claws, trapping the both of them. The witch then pulls a trapdoor, revealing a mouth-shaped pit where Hansel is dropped into a lower level of the house to be further fattened. It's here where we're introduced to a sentient, clown-esque gingerbread man named Dan Dan, a grotesquely erratic creature with a morbid fascination for being eaten, repeatedly shouting and singing a spoof of Rod Stewart's "Do You Think I'm Sexy?"
If you think I'm tasty and you want my body, come on, Hansel, take a bite.
He pressures Hansel to take one bite after another until the boy revolts, shattering the remaining piece of the cookie. During all of this, Gretel gets tasked with preparing the oven. Because, after all, the witch isn't a fan of eating raw children. Yes, you heard me correctly. The witch is planning a feast of her own. But you know what? Don't fret. Things only grow weirder from this point. As the kids retaliate, she snaps her candy cane, turning it into a set of candy nunchucks, and starts performing kung fu, accidentally puncturing the house's walls, causing it to ooze into a pool of multiple colored liquid goop. The scene culminates with the enraged witch drop-kicking herself directly into the oven intended for Hansel, and the two kids fleeing the house as the leaking persists, ultimately melting into a pile of mush. Then, suddenly, out from the lake of candy excess, a large swan boat, similar to the toy one their dad gave them earlier, emerges, taking them safely back home where they reunite with their father, who informs Hansel and Gretel that the wicked stepmother is gone, further connecting her to the witch, and that the three can now live peacefully and prosperously, cemented once the swan begins spouting a large sum of gold coins, providing them with enough wealth to not only survive, but also fly by the looks of it. Bringing this peculiar adventure to a happy ending. After airing twice on the network, Disney pulled it from syndication for various reasons. For starters, the heads of Disney programming found that the short was too experimental and unsettling, worrying that it might frighten younger viewers with some of its darker and shocking themes that would likely anger parents. The confusing part is that despite this perception, Return to Oz and The Black Cauldron were still in development at the time, hoping to attract slightly older kids and younger teens, though after Hansel and Gretel broadcasted on the channel, some appreciated its artsy and surreal style along with its dreamy jazz score conducted by Johnny Costa of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood fame. Others found it to be too odd and amateurish and had issues with its overall pacing, a feeling shared by Burton, who, looking back, was somewhat embarrassed by his first outing in live-action directing. His discomfort with the final product due to a rushed production schedule and a less than flexible budget also contributed to the film's very brief airway. Disney ultimately tossed it deep into the vault, further pushing it into obscurity, and to this day hasn't seen an official release on streaming or DVD. With that, this marked a second loss for Tim at the company. But luckily for him, at this point he had built a positive support team of friends amongst the many artists and producers at the studio, so they bit the bullet and decided to grant him one final shot with 1984's Frankenweenie. Here, Burton paid homage to his affection for classic black and white monster movies and stories, primarily, of course, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, following a shy, outcast young boy named Victor Frankenstein. A young Frankenstein, if you will.
Give my creation life!
Who, after losing his beloved pet dog Sparky, attempts to resurrect him back from the dead using a science experiment he learned in school. Despite initially being a success, the secret gets out around the quiet suburban town when the neighbors catch sight of the stitched-up, reanimated dog, and chaos ensues. Unlike Burton's previous efforts with Hansel and Gretel, this time the project levied a higher budget of nearly $1 million, featuring a cast consisting of Barrett Oliver, who had recently starred in that summer's cultural smash hit, The Neverending Story.
But that's impossible!
It also included famous Hollywood legends like Shelley Duvall and Daniel Stern in the role of the boys' parents. While the short may have had those strange, dark gothic elements Disney executives were turned off by, the story at its core had a lot of heart, illustrating how the love and deep bond Victor has for his dog can overcome the fear and prejudice. After shooting had wrapped and post-production was complete, the studio planned to premiere Frankenweenie as an opening featurette for the theatrical Christmas re-release of Pinocchio. Sadly, however, once the short reached the MPAA, they slapped it with a big PG rating, which wouldn't have worked alongside the G-rated Pinocchio, even though it also contained darker moments. These concerns escalated after test screenings reportedly upset children and had parents worried that it would inspire kids to recreate the dangerous experiments on their own pets. Then some displeased religious groups saw the playing God theme as inappropriate for the youth. This seemingly never-ending list of issues and complaints led to the short receiving a limited release before getting a VHS home media release in '92, after the mainstream success of Tim Burton's Batman. Speaking of, not long after Frankenweenie, Disney fired Burton. Although they had tried to make things work numerous times, giving him enough creative opportunities, at this point the company had faced many losses and didn't know where else they could possibly go with him. It was a mutual understanding that their paths were too far apart.
It wasn't like, The Apprentice, you're fired. It wasn't, I didn't walk into Alan Sugar at Disney, and it was a bit more, Disney friendly. It's like, here, let Goofy and Minnie show you. Oh, look at, there's a nice, beautiful exit with little cherubs on it. Oh, okay, I'll go out the Magic Forest door.
Not to mention, this was still during a financially uncertain time for Disney. When Walt passed in '66, it took a long time before the company got back on their feet again.
But this is not a film in the great Disney tradition of movies like Snow White and Pinocchio. It's simply a second-rate animated movie compared to those great classics of the past.
Before the Renaissance era kicked off with The Little Mermaid, just about everything the studio was putting out was underperforming, and they were really struggling for an extended period to turn out a critical and commercial hit. Something Tim Burton accomplished 9 months after, taking on his feature directing debut for Pee-wee's Big Adventure. While Tim's work might not have been noticed by or shown widely to the general public, Vincent and Frankenweenie did reach several industry creatives, including comedian Paul Reubens, who had recently been tasked by Warner Brothers to bring his stage show character Pee-wee Herman to the big screen.
I screened Frankenweenie, and after about the first minute of it, I thought, this is the guy. This guy, like, really is, like, perfect in so many ways. And we went back to Warner Brothers, and we said, we got it, Tim Burton.
Around this time, Burton also met lifelong friend and composing collaborator Danny Elfman. Warner Brothers would henceforth find repeated success with Beetlejuice, Batman, and its much darker follow-up, Batman Returns. The same could have been said for Edward Scissorhands if they had not sold the rights to 20th Century Fox, who are now owned by, you guessed it, the mouse. To circle around to things, by the early 90s, Tim was fully capable of guaranteeing box office hits, and Disney wanted to capitalize on a little piece of that pie. When they reached out, asking if he'd be interested, Burton already had a project rattling in his mind, based on his childhood love and fascination with holidays, such as Christmas and Halloween. Originally, the project started as a short poem intended to be adapted into a TV special in the vein of the famous Rankin and Bass stop-motion films, though now he had been allowed to fully realize and flesh out the world of peculiar characters out into a full-blown feature. But unfortunately for Tim, he couldn't be as hands-on in the role of directing because he was already caught up in the production of Batman Returns, so he passed that torch over to his good friend Henry Selick, who had a strong eye for the often tedious stop-motion process. After executives saw the final cut, they again were worried that their core family-friendly audience wouldn't be on board, so they chose to release it under their more adult-oriented sister studio, Touchstone Pictures. Along with this, to help boost marketing, they added Tim Burton's name in front of the title to convey to a larger audience his attachment, leading to the popular misconception that Burton, in fact, directed it. In the end, despite Disney's efforts, when the movie was initially released, it wasn't the commercial smash hit that they had hoped for.
The preview was a disaster. They put it in front of a bunch of kids that were expecting a Disney animation. And obviously, they were expecting something closer to The Lion King or Little Mermaid, and they were getting Nightmare Before Christmas.
Over the years, however, with repeated TV airings around the holidays and a 2006 3D theatrical re-release, the film began noticing a large surge in cult following. From there, Tim continued his complicated, complex relationship with the company. And in 2012, he even had the opportunity to direct an expanded stop-motion reimagining of his controversial short film Frankenweenie. You know, the one that had led to his original departure. Speaking of, in recent years, after his involvement with the 2019 Dumbo remake, Burton has made the statement that he doesn't plan to go back to the House of Mouse, describing his negative experience directing the film by comparing it to working at a horrible big circus and seeing himself as Dumbo, needing desperately to escape. Sentiments like this, along with concerns over Disney's stronger focus on recognizable and profitable IP, with a current priority toward Marvel franchises, had led him to feel once more out of place in the current landscape. opting instead to pursue other endeavors such as Netflix's Wednesday and returning to Warner Brothers for what was the long-awaited sequel to Beetlejuice. While it's unlikely Tim Burton will venture back to the happiest place on earth anytime soon, those early years undoubtedly left a pretty significant impact on his career trajectory, and despite once being criticized for wasting resources on projects devoid of any mainstream interest or appeal, those three specials have become easier to access today, all thanks to dedicated fans of lost or obscure media. I mean, someone even loved Tim Burton's version of Hansel and Gretel so much that they dedicated a full drag performance as tribute, and I gotta say, it's very entertaining. But what do you think of Tim Burton's time at Disney, or some of these early projects? Anything cool or interesting I missed? Let me know. Thanks for following along this little history deep dive, and I hope to catch you in the next one.